have been
We
overruled.
just have the opinion, Nora. I'm printing it out now, so we only have the majority. It's a 5-4 opinion. There is a majority written by Justice Alito that says Roe versus Wade is history. That landmark 1973 ruling that said a woman had a constitutional right to abortion now goes back to the states, who can set their own policies on abortion and decide whether or not they want to ban it entirely. Again, it's a 5-4 decision. There are 3 fierce dissents by the liberal justices, which we are printing out now, and we'll be getting through all of this. But based on my quick scan so far, and this is a lengthy opinion, it appears to track somewhat closely. There will be differences to the draft that leaked almost 2 months ago now, that also reflected the court was poised to overturn Roe versus Wade. So we had that signal then, and today we get the final ruling. That 49-year-old landmark ruling that made abortion rights the law of the land, grounded in the Constitution, is overturned.
This is huge, Nora. I mean, almost immediately in 23 states now, this means that access to abortion is severely restricted. There's about 9 states that have codified it, states like New Jersey, states like Connecticut, but this will be a patchwork of differing laws. This kicks off an incredible legal fight, Jan. I know you've been following this. In the states.
In the states.
To test whether those laws on the books reflect the will of their constituents or the political outcome of a very motivated constituency on this issue that is so divisive and so galvanizing on both sides of the aisle.
We cannot overestimate the importance of what is happening today, because for half a century, women have been guaranteed the federal right, a constitutional right to abortion. The Supreme Court saying today that the Constitution does not confer a right to abortion. It will be left up to the states.
And their legislatures, and therefore the people.
That's right.
They can decide how they want abortion policy to look in their states.
What is the legal undergirding behind Justice Alito's majority opinion?
Well, Justice Alito, in this majority opinion, joined by those 4 conservatives, essentially says that Roe was wrongly decided from the outset. There is no constitutional provision that mentions abortion, a right to privacy. It is not grounded in the text of the Constitution or in the history of this country, where states, even when the 14th Amendment, which has, of course, that very important liberty protection, was ratified. Shortly after that was ratified in the mid to late 1800s, all states made abortion a crime. So he goes back and looks and says Roe is just wrong. And yes, stare decisis, which means we let the decision stand. That's an important consideration, and that's why the court in 1992 refused to overturn Roe versus Wade. But today the court is saying the court in 92 was wrong, this was wrong when it was decided, and it is our duty to correct it as a matter of constitutional law. Because again, constitutional rulings, judges generally get to decide those. They're not like if you disagree with a law that the Congress passes and Congress can amend it. It's very difficult to pass a constitutional amendment.
Is the fact that Roe versus Wade the direct result of the 3 conservative justices that President Trump put on the Supreme Court?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, because
this is why elections matter. No matter what side of this issue you are on, the addition under President Trump of 3 conservative justices who oppose abortion rights allowed this to happen.
Absolutely. The opinion was written by Justice Samuel Alito. He was nominated by President George W. Bush. It was joined by Justice Clarence Thomas, nominated by President George H.W. Bush. And the 3 other conservatives who joined that opinion, Justice Neil Gorsuch, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, all 3 nominated by President Trump. You need 5 votes to have a majority. There's another conservative on that court, Chief Justice John Roberts. He did not join this majority. He's written separately saying that he agrees with the outcome, but that suggests he's not willing to go as far as this court. As he suggested in oral argument, and of course remember, this all started in Mississippi.
Right.
When Mississippi passed a 15-week ban on abortion.
I want to dig into the Chief Justice Roberts thing in just a moment, but first I want to go to our Chief Washington correspondent, Major Garrett, because he is there at the Supreme Court, and of course the crowds are erupting. The Supreme Court, a fortress. Tell us what you're seeing.
Right now, and I So, Nora, what we need to know is and observe is this landmark opinion, which many Americans, millions of them, will view as a retrenchment of an expected and understood right to access to abortion, has been delivered from within, as you just said, a fortress. The Supreme Court is surrounded on all sides by two layers of fencing. The see behind me is First Street, in front of the East Capitol of the capital of the United States. There are about 250 protesters, about equally divided on this issue. And immediately after it was clear that the Dobbs decision had been released, there was a roar from those who've long opposed abortion rights. We can see with our camera embedded into the protesters that many of those on the so-called pro-life side are crying, weeping in joy. Those who are on the pro-choice so-called side are angry and anguished. And what is clear from the street protests, again, it's not large in number. There have been larger protests in Washington, to be sure, but they are passionate, they are inflamed, and it is quite clear from within this fortress, this decision will not be the last word on access to abortion at the state level or probably in the United States Congress. Nora?
Major Garrett, thank you. I want to explain what this now means, that there is no longer a federal or constitutional right to an abortion, as Roe versus Wade has been overturned by the Supreme Court. Also, Casey overruled as well. I can show you now. There are 26 states across America that are certain or likely to ban at least some access to abortions. Here they are. 13 of those states have already passed those so-called trigger laws that in some cases ban all abortions, no exceptions for cases of rape, incest, or to protect the life of a mother. There are 16 states with Democratic-controlled state legislatures and the District of Columbia that have raced to pass laws that will protect a woman's right to an abortion. We can show you those states as well. We have a graphic for that. What I'm trying to tell you with the red states, that essentially that it would immediately ban abortion, and these states that have moved to protect abortion rights, we are going to have a patchwork of America. This is a tale of two Americas about where you can get abortion in America and where you cannot. It's just seismic, this decision.
And it's going to be seismic in the states because now the state legislatures are going to get to decide what abortion should look like, abortion rights should look like in their states.
And defining viability.
Right.
And defining when life begins.
Exactly. And so therefore, people in those states are going to have to, if they don't agree with what those 26 states are now about to do, are going to have to mobilize until something may change at the courts, at the federal level.
Jan Crawford is our chief legal correspondent, has covered the Supreme Court for 3 decades. This is one of the most significant reversals of a constitutional right in our court's history, correct?
Right, of course. I mean, the court has many times reverses previous decisions, including constitutional decisions that are wrongly decided. I mean, if you think of Dred Scott and Korematsu and some of those horrific decisions, this has been portrayed as the first time that the court is reversing a decision to take away a right. But to those on the other side, and in this majority opinion, that's the wrong analysis. This is a decision that is extending a right, as they would put it, to the unborn, and that Roe took away. So again, like with everything on abortion, it depends on how you view the underlying issue of what and when life begins.
And it's so, Jan's laying out the legal definitions here. Politically, this has been so divisive and so difficult that this has never been codified at the federal level into law. Even though this is now really seen as a Democrat versus Republican issue, it wasn't. For decades, there were, including the President of the United States, Democrats, people of faith who felt very uncomfortable. The President of the United States, Joe Biden, in fact, only issued the word abortion in his speech once since becoming President of the United States. This gets to so many complicated issues, but at the federal level, I asked Speaker Pelosi why, in all these decades, the United States has not codified this, and even she has recognized the shifting political balance here that has not made it possible, even when Democrats held the majority, to codify this into law. So there's no federal protection there. It becomes the state patchwork.
That's an excellent point, and I think that's why it's useful to look back to 1973 when the court decided Roe versus Wade. Abortion was illegal in this country until Colorado passed a law in 1967. That was only, I'm not good at math, but 6 or 7 years before Roe came down. 13 other states followed, and then 4 after that. So in less than half the states, when Roe came down, they'd only just recently started changing abortion laws to give more rights to women in those states. Roe has remained controversial. It was at the time, and even then Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, because the court stepped into this debate too soon and then set nationwide policy that abortion rights would be protected across the country. The states were moving in that direction already. So they jumped in to say, we're going to just shut off that debate. Today, in this opinion, which I'm still getting through, suggests that debate now will go back to the states where it should have always stayed. And then we will see how it evolves.
Listening to Jan, I mean, I literally have goosebumps.
Yeah.
This is such a huge moment, and this will have so many effects that we can't even fully appreciate today. You know, just looking at the fights that will be happening at the state levels and talking about that defining of viability, front page piece in the Wall Street Journal. What does this mean for in vitro fertilization? People who are seeking as a family to have a child. What does this mean to the embryos that they have frozen in hope to bring life into the world? What does this mean for employers? What does this mean for insurance carriers? The federal government, what do they do now that they have tried to guarantee that there will be access to an abortion pill, even in states where abortion is made illegal?
What about women who serve in the military and get abortion rights or contraceptive rights through their government-provided health care? What happens there?
Well, right now, what the Supreme Court says is what happens if you're, say, a woman in Mississippi or Georgia or any of these states right now that look poised to say abortion is illegal, is that you're going to have to go to your state capitol or go to your ballot box and say, wait a minute, of course we should be able to have IVF. You're going to pass these laws. That's your redress now. It's not going to be at this point at the Supreme Court anymore.
There is so much to talk about. We are going to get through not only the legal impact, the political impact, the economic impact. Let's bring in Kelly Robinson. She is the executive director of the Planned Parenthood Action Fund. Kelly, what does this ruling mean?
This is devastating. The courts have failed this country. The courts have failed women and pregnant people all over this country. I have to remind you, there is no state in this country where banning abortion is popular. 80% of people are with us on this issue. In the court, this is not the people's court. This is a devastating moment where people are scared, they are afraid, and Planned Parenthood will be here to support them in finding care in any way we possibly can. But this moment is dark and it's devastating.
What does it mean in certain states? How will you see the impact for Planned Parenthood?
The impact is going to be immediate. There are 13 states that will ban abortion immediately. And 26 states over the course of the next couple of months will ban access to abortion care. That's hundreds of thousands of people that will be impacted each year, 15 to 20,000 people per month that we need to make sure are finding access to care a different way. And the problem is we've already seen this play out in places like Texas and Oklahoma that have fundamentally banned access. In those states, we are seeing people have to travel across state lines, travel hundreds of miles. We're seeing them have to find solutions for their healthcare needs outside of the traditional system, or at worst, be forced to carry their pregnancies to term. This is not the America we were promised. This is not in the interest of the people.
And we are looking at some of the polling right now by CBS News. Kelly, thank you very much for joining us. Stay with us if you don't mind as we continue to pour through these decisions. In terms of that polling that we have from CBS News, Roe versus Wade, keep it as it is. 64% of the country say keep it as it is. 36% say overturn it. The other poll numbers we have, should abortion be generally available? 50% have said yes. 33% saying there should be stricter limits. So the numbers here in terms of breaking down where this country is on this issue, Margaret, those are national polls. But in the states, we're divided. And in most of red America now, abortion is illegal.
That's right. And defining exactly where life begins is also of varying places. In certain states, including Missouri, they're looking at 8 weeks. 8 weeks after which abortion would be made illegal. In others, they're looking farther out, 24 weeks. It's a varying patchwork here, and it will have huge implications, particularly for poor women, for women of color. New York and Illinois had the highest rates of reported abortion in 2019, but those are reported abortions. This is something that is, across the country, across socioeconomic lines, used here. Now, what does this mean in terms of the politics? It's messy. It's complicated. In the state of Michigan, the governor there, Governor Whitmer, is already suing county prosecutors to try to stop them from enforcing the original law from 1931 in Michigan that made abortion illegal with no exception for rape, with no exception for incest. And so this is going to get very tangled as people, I think, slowly start reading in on exactly what their local laws are. Many people have not necessarily tracked what those restrictions are because they knew that the court at the federal level had secured this. And now it's going to be far more complicated. I also, looking at these protesters, Nora, the other thing I want to highlight, the Department of Homeland Security had already warned about political violence in the weeks and months ahead. And we know that the National Abortion Federation found incidents of assault and battery against providers and patients was up 128% in 2021 versus 2020.
And there's also been an increase in violence at some of the pregnancy centers, which, of course, are there to try to talk women out of having abortions. We've seen that in the last several weeks. Planned Parenthood and other groups releasing a statement this morning saying they were condemning all types of violence or threats, again, anticipating that we may see some of that in the wake of this decision. But I'm just getting through, if I could get to some of the...
Yes, and I'll let you talk. Let me just do that. Just to recap, everyone that is just joining us right now, the Supreme Court today has overruled Roe versus Wade, eliminating the constitutional right to an abortion after almost 50 years. This is a decision that will transform American life. It will reshape our nation's politics, and it will lead to almost total bans on abortions in almost half of the states across America. Just let that sink in for a minute about what that means. The big question we are asking today, what does it mean for abortions that are done with pills? Because half of abortions are done with pills. What does that mean? What does it mean for the future of contraceptive rights? What does it mean for the future of those who seek fertility treatments and use things like in vitro fertilization? These are all questions that we are going to try and dive in today.
Well,
and what will it mean?
That.
Okay, great.
I mean, what that means is it's going to be up to the people in the state capitals. So some states are going to try to ban medical abortions. Some states are going to try to prevent women from accessing medical abortions, the pills that might be out of state or out of country. All of those questions now are going to depend on what the state legislatures and the governors decide on in those states. And that's the bottom line. And it's not, you can no longer go to the Supreme Court and say, this law is illegal, it's unconstitutional. The court is saying that there is no constitutional right to an abortion. Go to your state legislator and tell him, take it up with him or her. We're out of it. I mean, that's basically what the court has said. And if we want to look, I'm just going again through this opinion, right at the top, and again, it appears to track pretty closely to different language, and it's a few pages longer. But on page 6 of the opinion, here is the essential holding that, I mean, Justice Alito and the majority is saying Roe was an abuse of judicial authority. Roe was egregiously wrong from the start. Its reasoning was exceptionally weak, and the decision has had damaging consequences. Far from bringing to end a national settlement of the issue, Roe and Casey, the 92 case we talked about, have inflamed debate and deepened division. It's time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. That is the holding in this case. If you don't agree with the state, if you don't like it, it's in the state legislatures now. The other question people had, though, as a result of this ruling, eliminating a constitutional right to abortion, is what about all these other areas of the law that are grounded in a right to privacy under the liberty component of the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment? There are a lot of cases. Right to contraception, right to same-sex marriage. The court has expanded on that from its original draft that we saw 2 months ago.
Oh, so this is new. So what is in this?
So
this
on
is page 71.
On page 71, the dissenters, of course, say it calls into question all of those cases. The liberals are saying this calls into question same-sex marriage. This calls into question a right to contraceptives because those are grounded, again, in that same underpinnings of the Constitution that Roe versus Wade and subsequently Casey was. The court is much stronger today. They bolstered that part of their decision. We have stated unequivocally that nothing in this opinion should be understood to cast doubt on precedents that do not concern abortion. We have explained why that is so. Rights regarding contraception and same-sex relationships are inherently different from the right to abortion because the latter, as we have stressed, as the court is saying, uniquely involves what Roe and Casey termed potential life. It is hard to see how we could be clearer. So the court today is emphasizing this does not impact those cases because abortion is unique. It is unique because of the prospect of fetal life, or as the Mississippi law says, an unborn being.
You're trying to say that they are making the case that this only deals with abortion. Don't read more into it than you should.
Making it, it's as Justice Alito says, it's hard to see how we could be any clearer on this issue. And
however, Justice Thomas has issued a concurring opinion, but on page 117, he has said that he wants to reconsider Griswold, Lawrence, and Oberfeld. Explain what that means, what Justice Thomas, though, wants to do.
So here's the Thomas opinion. He's writing separately. He's off on a trip of his own on this, though. He is writing for himself. And remember, how many votes? You need 5 to change the law. And not a single conservative justice is joining him. So that means, unless they change their minds and backtrack on this language that they've written today, there's going to have to be 4 more justices who would support that view. He is the only one saying that those cases also are called into question. No one else joins him. The majority says they're not.
You know, Jan, we talk about rights being taken away or lack of access. There's also that question of what rights can come out of this that Congress potentially could act on.
Great point.
We are putting on women, particularly if you look at just the statistics, poor and black women are the highest recipients of abortions. What tools is the federal government giving them, for example, to stay employed and paid while they carry that baby to term and deliver that baby? There's no federal guaranteed, right to keep getting paid past 6 weeks of paid medical leave in this country.
There is no consensus on abortion in this country, but there is one area of debate that both sides can come together on, and I've been interviewing them for the last several weeks trying to get ready for this, and that is maternal health, access to child care, support for women in the states and at the federal level has to improve. Whether you're in a red state or a blue state, a state legislator or a congressperson, that is an area of the law that now, especially with this decision, has got to improve.
Because we have
to do
the
more.
highest maternal mortality rate of any developed country in the world. That is stunning.
It is stunning. And on that point, just to clarify, 38% of all women who had abortions were non-Hispanic black, while 33% were non-Hispanic white, 21% were Hispanic, and 7% of other races. 58% of abortions were for women who had never had one before. And this one, 9 out of 10 abortions in the U.S. in 2019 took place by 15 weeks of gestation, which was the original Mississippi law, Dobbs versus Jackson Health. But then when they argued it, they asked for a total reversal of Roe versus Wade.
26 states asked the Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade. So that gives you some idea of where those 26 states are going to be, and we've already shown you a graphic of that. But I'll make one more point, and again, we'll keep going through this, but the role of the Chief Justice, right? I mean, until we had these 3 recent nominees by President Trump, John Roberts could sometimes move the court. He was considered the swing vote. So if Roberts didn't want to swing for the fences, the conservatives were restrained because he could keep them from, he was the 5th vote. Now his vote does not matter. There are 5 justices who are willing to swing for the fences and go much further than he did. And today, he does not join them on the reasoning and why this court is saying Roe and Casey should be overturned. He agrees that that state law can be upheld, but he doesn't think the court needs to go as far. Now, abortion rights supporters say, what's the difference? If you're going to uphold a 15-week ban, states are just going to try to uphold a 10-week ban and then a 6-week ban. So is it a distinction without a difference? Perhaps.
It's an excellent point. There had been some speculation that Chief Justice Roberts would achieve some sort of what people were calling the Roberts Compromise. Would he be able to pull
one? He just needed one.
One, and to just say, no, let's just keep it at 15 weeks. Let's uphold Mississippi, but let's not do something as seismic as overturn Roe versus Wade. Do you think he tried to do that?
Absolutely. But I think that from the start, that was getting no traction. That's a very difficult, it's a 15-week ban is completely inconsistent with Roe versus Wade, which of course prohibits states from restricting abortion before viability. Viability is 24 weeks or so. 15 weeks is pre-viability. It's directly at odds with Roe versus Wade. So how could you write that principled decision? And the justices, the conservative justices, signaled in the oral arguments in early December that they were not going along with that, which is why we thought in December that Roe was going to be overturned, and the only question was whether it was going to be 5-4 overturning Roe, or whether it would be 6-3 with Roberts finally agreeing to join the conservatives. He did not.
Just to recap, the Supreme Court has just ruled in this landmark case. It will be taught in schools for decades to come. It will become just as popular as Roe versus Wade for people who can name Supreme Court decisions, because they have just eliminated the constitutional right for an abortion after almost 50 years. This will lead to all but total bans on the procedure in about half of the states in America, most of them red states in America, which have already passed some of these laws or have so-called trigger laws.
And those trigger laws, some of those trigger laws take effect. Abortion is illegal in several states now, right now. They take effect immediately. Others are going to require signature, which we will probably see this afternoon. Then those laws will take effect. There's a handful that'll take 30 days. But right now in states in America, abortion is illegal.
March for Life is an annual rally and march opposing both the practice and legality of abortion. President Jeannie Mancini is with us. And Jeannie, your reaction?
Well, Nora, I can't help but think of the hundreds of thousands every year, the collective millions of pro-life Americans that have marched every single year since Roe v. Wade. And they've marched because they believe that the unborn person is the poorest of the poor, the most vulnerable, and that abortion is a human rights abuse. And so today, all of those who've marched, I just want to say thank you. And we still have our work cut out for us, of course. You've mentioned that many states will have life protective laws, and we're very grateful about that. And but there are many threats of violence right now against the pro-life movement, against Americans who just very much have the right to believe in this. And we need to increase our support to women and men facing unexpected pregnancies. It's already very strong, but we absolutely need to put our money where our mouth is in that regard.
How will you do that? I mean, as you know, more than half of abortions are carried out for women in their 20s. In many of these states, I'm thinking about Texas in particular, they have rolled back health care coverage for poor women. How will March for Life, how will you pivot to help women in need?
Well, first, the role of the March for Life is to gather pro-life Americans in the public square so that they can testify to the beauty of the unborn child. So that's what we do. But many other organizations will be very involved. For example, you mentioned Texas, and simultaneous to the heartbeat law being passed, there was also a funding stream of $100 million. So let me say that again, $100 million that was passed to provide resources for women in these scenarios. So collectively, when we consider the Pregnancy Resource Center movement, which I would say is the untold story in the pro-life movement, we know that over $270 million of free resources are made available to men and women facing unexpected pregnancies every single year. Now, we need to increase that. I know, for example, of a beautiful church in Gaithersburg, Maryland. You can check it out yourself. It's called St. John Newman, and they have vowed to making sure that every single woman in Gaithersburg, Maryland will have everything that she needs so that she won't ever feel backed into a corner to make the choice of abortion. You know, we've gone from this idea of abortion being safe, legal, and rare to abortion on demand until birth, paid for by your tax dollars. And today's decision takes that away. Essentially, it allows the United States to stop being one of only 7 countries around the entire world that allows late-term abortion. It allows states to be able to limit abortion at 15 weeks and earlier if they so choose. So it really returns it to the people. and I'm grateful.
Jeannie Mancini, the president of March for Life, thank you. Want to bring back in our Jan Crawford, our chief legal correspondent. I know you're still pouring through this decision.
I want to get to some of the dissents. Obviously, and keep in mind kind of where we are, the landscape here. 5 justices. Takes 5 justices to form a majority on the court. That's what we have today. The 5th vote was our newest justice, Amy Coney Barrett, who replaced, of course, the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That is decisive, right?
She was a fierce defender of women's rights and women's abortion rights.
And if she were still on the court, or someone who had replaced her who had a liberal perspective, the court would not have overturned Roe or Casey. But we have some powerful dissents from the 3 remaining liberals, all joined Justice Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan. And there is a joint dissent, not written by one with others joining. It's a joint dissent, meaning they all agree with this. And they emphasize throughout the dissent really what they see the court is doing here. And if I could just read from page 2, right at the top, the court's ruling, the liberals say, says that from the very moment of fertilization, a woman has no rights to speak of. A state can force her to bring a pregnancy to term, even at the steepest personal and familial cost. An abortion restriction is permissible. And it then goes on to predict states will feel free to enact all manner of restrictions, saying that we've already seen it, going on to predict that there will be many more to come. And then on page 4, the joint dissent says, whatever the exact scope of the coming laws, one result of today's decision is certain: the curtailment of women's rights and of their status as free and equal citizens. Yesterday, the Constitution guaranteed a woman confronted with an unplanned pregnancy could make her own decision. But today, that is no longer.
And that is why I think it was such an important question you asked during that March for Life interview of what tools are being provided to women to go through the very dangerous process of actually delivering a child. That's what the maternal mortality numbers mean. That means it is a risk to your life to carry a child to term, more so in this country than other developed countries in the world. What becomes the policy response at the state and the federal level to that? What becomes the policy response to the children who are born into poverty in these states to women who would have otherwise aborted? Because it puts even more of a burden back on those governments and on those taxpayers to provide potentially. What is our policy response there? I mean, that's kind of where I see another part of this argument going that impacts not just women, but families across the board in this country.
You raised an important point earlier when you said, what could the federal government do, suggesting that perhaps they can pass legislation to give more support for child care, more time off, enhance maternal health programs. There's also going to be a lot of questions about what President Biden can do. For example, can he do anything through executive order to make medical abortion more available through the mail and have the FDA do something like that?
Let's bring in our chief White House correspondent, Nancy Cordes, because she is with us and can dig in on just that very point. President Biden has talked about these so-called executive orders or actions, but would it really do anything, Nancy?
Well, Nora, it certainly wouldn't make up for abortion being banned in multiple states, but the president is being urged by abortion rights activists to take a series of actions that would make it easier for women who live in states where abortion is banned to go ahead and get an abortion. So, for example, just today, a group of African-American female lawmakers urged him to declare a public health emergency if this ruling were to come down the way that it now has. There are others, as Jan mentioned, who are urging him to drop the last FDA restrictions on the sale of abortion pills. Currently, pharmacies need a special license in order to dispense those pills. There are many Democrats who want him to push the FDA to do away with that. Provide travel vouchers, possibly, for women who need to cross state lines to get an abortion. They want him to look into whether abortions can be provided on federal lands in states that ban abortion. So there's sort of a whole menu there for the president to choose from. The White House has been very quiet about what exactly he will do, though we do expect to hear from him sometime today.
Nancy Cordes at the White House. Also want to bring in our chief election and campaign correspondent, Robert Costa. He is on Capitol Hill this morning. And Robert, this is one of the chief legacies for former President Trump. He was successful, along with then Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, of appointing a number of judges to the federal benches, and including 3 to the Supreme Court. What do you think happens now with the midterms just less than 6 months away?
That's exactly right, Nora. This moment is the culmination of a conservative project inside the Republican Party to upend the federal judiciary, overhaul it by nominating conservatives across the board, including to the Supreme Court. Former President Trump nominated Justice Gorsuch, got him confirmed, then Justice Kavanaugh, then finally Justice Coney Barrett. This decision today landed like a thunderclap on Capitol Hill and on the American political scene. It changes the dynamics potentially for the midterm elections, bringing this issue, social issues, abortion rights, to the fore of a midterm campaign and discussion that had been primarily focused so far on the economy and on inflation.
And we're showing now the states with trigger laws that would restrict abortions now that Roe versus Wade is overturned. Most of these traditionally red states, as we call them, or conservative states, if you will. Jan, you were talking about, and in many of these states, it will be illegal today, it's already illegal.
It was immediate. That's the way the laws were written. Some states requires a signature. Again, I'm sure we'll see that in some state capitals this afternoon, where there'll be fanfare signing it. Then it will take effect later this afternoon.
Right, and that's why when we talked about Michigan, for example, where it's already illegal under this 1931 law, you have the governor, a Democratic governor with a Republican legislature, turning to the courts to have a fight about this. So yesterday you had Vice President Harris meeting with about 7 state attorneys general to talk about finding creative solutions here. They want to look like they're doing something, though, as Jan just laid out, there's very little that can be done to actually change this. But at the state level, the Biden administration wants to look like they are encouraging something, and some of these creative lawsuits.
We are just wrapping up our coverage of this historic day here in Washington. And so, Jan, I want to ask you, what does this ruling mean for women in America, for the future of politics in America?
I mean, Roe versus Wade was the few decisions Americans can say by name. That decision is history. And this issue of abortion and abortion rights, what it means is the Supreme Court will not have any say anymore. It's going to be up to your elected representatives in the state where you live. And that's where the fight is going to be. And the Supreme Court and its majority is saying that's where it always should have been. Roe was wrongly decided from the start.
Do you expect, Margaret, marches across America, that this becomes the top issue in campaigns?
Absolutely. In fact, I was personally surprised in some ways that this was happening on a Friday, going into a weekend where there are warnings of political violence and marches, and not held for Monday, for example, when people are at work. This is something that we will be tracking very closely.
Thank you very much. And this is a historic day because after nearly 50 years, the Supreme Court has overturned Roe versus Wade, taking away the constitutional right to an abortion. And with that decision, Roe versus Wade is no longer the law of the land. I'm Nora O'Donnell in Washington. We'll have more tonight on the CBS Evening News.